Have you ever wondered why you have to pay just for the right to exist? Not for food, not for clothing, but for the very place in the sun. We're used to thinking that this is for our own good, that it's the inevitable price for civilization and safety. They don't teach this in schools. They don't talk about it on TV. They've drilled into us that economics is a complex science accessible only to the elite, and that debts are the natural engine of progress. But what if I told you that our entire financial reality is an artificial facade, built quite recently? You don't even notice how you're paying for air. At what point did we surrender this right? Who decided that you must account for every cent you earn to a structure that produces nothing? Look at your life. You wake up on a schedule, spend the best hours of your biological prime gathering resources that you immediately hand back to the system in the form of interest, fees, and taxes. Do you think you own your house or apartment? Try not paying the property tax, and you'll quickly find out who the real owner is. Your property is an illusion. Your freedom is merely the length of the leash regulated by your credit score. The scariest part of this story isn't that we've been deceived. What's terrifying is how this trap snapped shut with frightening synchronicity around the world. If you start comparing dates, your hair will stand on end. This isn't conspiracy theory. These are dry facts available in archives, but buried under mountains of informational garbage. The official version of economic history crumbles as soon as you start asking the right questions. We're told that the banking system evolved over millennia, but the monster that controls the world today was born almost simultaneously in all developed countries at the end of the 19th and beginning of the 20th century. It looks as if someone pressed a button and sent the same playbook to governments of different states.
Think about how people lived before the era of central banks. The world wasn't plunged into chaos. On the contrary, it was a time when a merchant's honest word was worth more than gold, and the debt pit was a shame, not the norm of life. Let's rewind time. Before the mid-19th century, in most countries of the world, there existed a completely different model of interaction. People exchanged real values. Gold, silver, grain, labor, all of this had physical weight and concrete value. But most importantly, money was a tool, not a commodity. Do you understand the difference? A tool helps build a house. A commodity is what you buy. Today, money itself has become a commodity that they sell us for rent at interest. This is a colossal substitution of concepts. Previously, a person was autonomous. If you had land, you could build a house on it, and no one demanded building permission, an approved plan from a commission, or payment of a fee for commissioning. You were the creator of your own reality. Today, you are a user who has been issued a temporary license to live, and this license needs to be constantly renewed. The deeper I dug, the more terrifying the picture of global unification became. Pay attention to the period from 1870 to 1913. It was precisely in this short historical interval, in most Western countries and their colonies, that there occurred a sharp change in the rules of the game. Laws were introduced that made the use of government, and later centralized banknotes, mandatory. Up to that point, in many regions, private currencies, debt notes of local communities, bills of real enterprises circulated. The economy was decentralized, alive, and incredibly resilient to external shocks. A local crisis remained local, but someone really needed to unite all financial vessels into one bloodstream. Why? To be able to drain the blood from the entire body at once. Look at the creation of the Federal Reserve System in 1913.
This is a classic example, but not the only one. Similar structures under different names began appearing everywhere, like mushrooms after rain. The Bank of England, though created earlier, precisely in this period acquires its totalitarian functions as a regulator. Germany, France, Japan. Everywhere the script is the same. People's real gold and silver are gradually, step by step, confiscated and replaced with paper certificates. At first, they told us, this paper is equal to gold. You can exchange it back at any moment. That was lie number one. It was the bait. As soon as the population got used to the convenient paper and stopped carrying heavy coins in their pockets, the trap began to close. But it's not just about money. It's about language and meanings. A linguistic sabotage occurred. Look at the word credit. It comes from a Latin root meaning to believe, to trust. Originally, it was a relationship between two people based on reputation. Now, credit is a mathematically calculated mechanism of enslavement, where trust is replaced by collateral and debt collectors. Or take the word mortgage. In translation from ancient languages, particularly Greek, it has roots referring to the concept of a pledge until death. Deadly pledge. You sign a contract that literally drains your life energy over 20 or 30 years. You pay with your time, the only irreplaceable resource. The control system was built not on guns or prisons, it was built on paper. Bureaucracy became the invisible cement that shackled free society. Have you noticed how synchronously passports appeared in their modern understanding in different countries? Before World War I, a person could travel half the globe without a single document. Borders were conventions on a map, not barbed wire with armed posts. The introduction of the passport system was presented as a temporary wartime necessity. But as is known, nothing is more permanent than government temporary measures. We were numbered. We were entered into registries. We were turned from living souls into legal persons, subjects of law that can be managed through statutes and codes. And here we come to the most interesting question. Who benefits from this? Who won from billions of people losing financial independence and becoming cogs in a global mechanism? The answer lies not in the names of specific politicians. They are just interchangeable managers, actors reading from a teleprompter. The answer lies in the structure of debt itself. All modern money supply is debt. Every bill in your wallet, every digit on your bank account came into existence only because someone, somewhere, took a loan. If tomorrow everyone repays all debts, money will simply disappear from the world. It will be gone. Absolute zero. The system is designed so that we never pay it off. Deficit is embedded in the mathematical formula of our existence. This is not a bug, not a glitch in the system. This is its main feature. We've been driven into a hamster wheel where we must run just to stay in place. But how exactly was this done? How were millions of free craftsmen, farmers, and merchants convinced to give up their independence? Here, the technology of artificial scarcity and monopolization comes into play. Let's look truth in the eye. To make a free person work for the system, you first need to deprive him of the ability to work for himself. This didn't happen overnight. It was a meticulously planned operation to destroy the economic autonomy of the individual. The more I delved into the archives of the early 20th century, the more clearly this frightening pattern emerged. We see a synchronous attack on small businesses, craftsmen, and farmers in all developed countries. This was a war not with weapons, but with regulations. Have you ever wondered where the concept of licensing came from? In the 19th century, if you knew how to cut hair, you were a barber. If you knew how to build, you were a carpenter. Your license was your hands and your neighbor's reviews. But suddenly, as if on command, states begin introducing mandatory permits for conducting business. The right to work, which is the natural right of every living person, is substituted with a work permit that you have to buy from bureaucrats.
This is a fundamental paradigm shift. What was yours by birth became a privilege issued for money. Look at the dates. The period from 1910 to 1930 is when the legislative vice tightened simultaneously in America, Europe, and Asia. It was then that standards, GOSTs, sanitary norms impossible to meet in a private household or small workshop, were massively introduced. This was done not for consumer safety, as textbooks tell us. This was done to destroy competitors of large corporations.
A small bakery can't afford a separate room for washing eggs and a full-time technologist, but a giant factory can. This is how monopolies were artificially created. The system squeezed people out of their own homes and workshops, herding them into huge factory shops. Man ceased to be a creator. He became a function, an appendage to the machine. But the most ingenious and devilish trick was pulled off with taxes. Do you know that income tax is a relatively recent invention? In most countries, it didn't exist until the beginning of the 20th century, or it was introduced as an emergency measure during wartime and immediately repealed. But in 1913 in the US, and soon in other countries, laws on permanent income tax were passed. At first, they sold it to us under the guise of social justice, saying only the super rich would pay. This was a classic trap. The entry threshold gradually lowered, rates increased, and soon every working person fell into this net.
Think about the absurdity of the situation. The state taxes your labor, that is, your life energy, even before you get the money in your hands. You work part of the year for free, just to cover interest on government debts that you didn't take. Parallel to the economic pressure, there was a restructuring of minds. The education system we know today was implemented precisely during this period. The Prussian school model, focused on drill and obedience, was exported around the world. The architects of the new economy didn't need thinkers, philosophers, or free craftsmen. They needed performers, capable of carrying out routine operations from 9 to 5 and not asking extra questions. School ceased to be a place for transmitting knowledge about the world and became a factory for producing personnel. Logic, rhetoric, and personal finance management disappeared from the curricula. They were replaced by rote memorization of facts.
We were taught in what year the Battle of Waterloo took place, but not how compound interest works, or how to defend your rights in court. This is no accident. This is the creation of the ideal consumer and debtor. A person who doesn't understand how money works is doomed to be its slave. Another important piece of this puzzle is the destruction of communities and cooperatives. Before the era of central banks, people united in artels, mutual aid funds, and credit unions. Money circulated within the community, and interests stayed with their own. This made people strong and independent of external crises. But legislation systematically destroyed these forms of association, imposing bank intermediation. Banks gained a monopoly on creating money out of thin air. Think about it. When you take a loan, the bank doesn't give you depositors' money. It simply prints digits on the screen, creating new debt. But you must repay it with real labor plus interest. This is a mathematical anomaly that inevitably leads to the concentration of all resources in the hands of those who print the money. I researched the archives and stumbled upon a strange synchronicity in the adoption of land use laws. At some point, property tax was introduced practically everywhere. This means you never truly own your home. You're just renting it from the state. Stop paying, and they'll take it away. This destroyed the sense of security. Previously, a home was a fortress, a family nest passed down from generation to generation. Now, it's an asset on the balance sheet that requires constant investments. A person who fears losing the roof over their head is much more compliant. He will agree to any job, any conditions, just to pay the annual tribute. This system couldn't exist without global coordination.
We see how the same families and financial clans stood at the origins of creating central banks in London, Paris, Berlin, and New York.
They acted as a single organism, seizing control over the planet not through territorial conquest, but through capturing money flows. They created a world where scarcity is an artificial state. 20th century technologies already allowed feeding and clothing everyone, but abundance is not profitable for the control system. If a person has everything, they can't be managed. Therefore, the consumption machine was launched. They drilled into us that happiness is a new purchase. Fashion, planned obsolescence of goods, all these are tools to make us spend what we haven't earned yet. Look at the 1930s, the Great Depression in the US and similar crises in Europe. Official history speaks of market failures, but the facts scream that it was a planned asset seizure. Contraction of the money supply by central banks led to the bankruptcy of thousands of independent businesses and farms. Lands, factories, and most importantly, people's freedom were bought up for pennies. It was then that the foundations of the corporate world in which we live now were laid. A world where a corporation has more rights than a person. A legal entity became more important than a living one. This was the greatest substitution in the history of law. Have you ever wondered why prices always rise? We're told that inflation is a natural process, a sign of a developing economy. But let's turn on logic. Technologies improve, production is robotized, logistics speeds up. By all laws of physics and common sense, goods should get cheaper. Making a chair today is 100 times simpler and faster than 100 years ago. But why does it cost more? The answer is simple and terrifying. Inflation is not a natural phenomenon. It's a hidden tax that they don't deduct from your paycheck, but take straight from your wallet by devaluing your labor. It's a mechanism created specifically so that you can never accumulate enough resources to exit the system. If money doesn't melt away, you become independent. If it burns in your hands, you're forced to run to work, again and again. Let's return to the key points of this robbery. 1933. The United States of America, bastion of democracy and private property. President Roosevelt signs Executive Order Number 6102. Remember this document. It declared the possession of gold coins, bullion, and certificates by private individuals a crime. Under threat of prison and huge fines, people were forced to surrender real assets to the state in exchange for paper dollars. This was the moment of truth. Overnight, millions of people turned from owners of capital into holders of government debt notes. Similar measures, though not always so openly, were taken around the world. Gold is freedom because it owes nothing to anyone. Paper is dependency because its value is dictated by those who control the printing press. But this was only the first act. The second act of the global play unfolded in 1944 in Bretton Woods, and then was finally cemented in 1971 when the last link between money and gold was severed. From that moment, money became fiat, backed only by the honest word of governments and military power. The era of unlimited emission began. Banks gained the right to create money literally out of thin air. This is called fractional reserve banking. When you take out a mortgage, the bank doesn't give you someone else's savings. It simply enters figures into the computer, creating a new deposit. These money didn't exist a second ago, but the debt you take on is absolutely real. You are obligated to repay it with your time, sweat, and blood. Here lies the main mathematical trap that economists are silent about. Banks create the principle of the loan, but they do not create money for paying interest. There is always less money in the world than debt. This is a game of musical chairs, where there are deliberately fewer chairs than players. To repay a loan with interest, someone must take out a new loan, injecting new money into the system. This is a classic financial pyramid, elevated to the rank of state policy. Bankruptcy of part of the population is mathematically built into the system. Someone must inevitably lose for the system to continue existing. And that someone is usually the ordinary person, not the corporation, which will always be bailed out at the taxpayer's expense. Who benefits from keeping us in this wheel? Look at the structure of transnational corporations. In the 1920s of the last century, when the banking noose was just tightening, the first global cartels emerged. The most striking example that proves the economy is managed, not developing chaotically, is the Phoebus cartel. In 1924, the largest electric lamp manufacturers from around the world gathered in Geneva. They agreed to artificially reduce the lifespan of the light bulb from 2,500 hours to 1,000. Engineers specifically worked on degrading the product quality. This is a documented fact. Why? So that you would buy bulbs more often. This is the birth of the concept of planned obsolescence. Today, this principle permeates everything. Things break right after the warranty period. Phones slow down after updates. Clothes tear after a season. This is not manufacturers' clumsiness. It's a strategy for extracting resources. The debt economy requires constant money turnover. If you buy an eternal car and an eternal refrigerator, you stop taking consumer loans. The banking system would collapse. Therefore, we're forced to consume garbage, turning the planet into a landfill and our lives into a race for new models. We pay for this twice. First, with money. Second, with ecology and health. Look at the dates of creation of key monopolies. Pharmaceuticals, energy, agribusiness. All these giants were formed and consolidated precisely during crises organized by bankers. The Great Depression and subsequent recessions destroyed the middle class, allowing big capital to buy assets for pennies. This is called market consolidation. Today, you enter a supermarket and see hundreds of brands. This is an illusion of choice. If you look at the ownership structure, it turns out that 90% of products are produced by 10 mega corporations, and these corporations, in turn, are owned by the same investment funds. The circle is closed. Money flows from one pocket of the owners to another, and we merely service this flow, leaving ourselves crumbs for sustenance. Another tool of pressure is the complication of laws. In the 19th century, the tax code fit on a few pages. Today, it's thousands of volumes that even a professional lawyer can't unravel. This was done intentionally. Complexity creates dependence on specialists and fear of making a mistake. An ordinary person can't run a business without hiring an army of accountants and consultants. This is a barrier to entry that weeds out competitors. The system tells us, don't try to be independent. It's too complicated and dangerous. Go into employment. There, everything will be decided for you. Become a cog. But the scariest thing is happening now. We stand on the threshold when cash money, the last bastion of anonymity and freedom, is systematically being destroyed. Under the pretext of fighting crime and convenience, they're herding us into a digital concentration camp. Cashless payments allow tracking every step you take, every purchase, every habit. This is no longer just an economy, it's total surveillance. If before you could hide a stash under the mattress and survive hard times, now your savings are a database entry that can be zeroed out or frozen with one button press if your behavior doesn't please the algorithm. And here we approach the moment when the trap snapped shut completely.
If at the beginning of the 20th century they took away our gold and right to free labor, then by the middle of the century, the system moved to the most important asset, our body and mind. This is that very big bomb that polite society doesn't talk about. We're used to thinking of a reset as something instantaneous, like a global catastrophe. But the real reset happened quietly, without explosions or sirens. It was a fundamental change in human status. From owner of the land and creator, he was turned into a resource. Have you ever pondered the meaning of the term human resources? It appeared in corporate lexicon precisely when the system fully formed. A resource is oil, coal, forest. A resource is extracted, used, and when exhausted, written off. We stopped being perceived as people. We became payroll, statistics, a line in the budget. Look how elegantly the operation to sterilize knowledge was carried out. 100 years ago, the average person could build a house themselves, treat a simple illness, grow food, and repair their tools. This made them dangerous to the system because they were autonomous. They could say no. Today's urban resident is a creature with learned helplessness. We don't know how our sewage works, where electricity comes from, or what's really on our plate. We've delegated our lives to specialists. But who licenses these specialists? The same system. The circle is closed. You can't treat people without a protocol approved from above. You can't teach children without a program issued from the ministry. Any attempt to step outside the bounds is punished by law. This isn't care for quality. It's a monopoly on truth. This is especially evident in the example of medicine and pharmaceuticals. In the early 20th century, there existed many schools of healing: naturopathy, homeopathy, herbal medicine. But after the publication of the Flexner Report in 1910 in the US and similar reforms in Europe, all alternative methods were declared illegal. Funding was given only to those schools that were ready to prescribe patented chemical drugs. Notice, precisely patented. You can't patent chamomile. You can't make super profits from it. But from a synthetic compound, easily. This is how an industry was created that benefits not from curing the patient, but from relieving symptoms, turning the disease into a chronic condition. The ideal consumer is one who is sick for a long time but doesn't die immediately, and can still work to pay for their treatment. Parallel to this was an attack on food security. The Green Revolution of mid-century was presented as salvation from hunger. In reality, it was putting agriculture on the needle of petrochemicals. Traditional seed varieties, which could be planted year after year, were displaced by hybrids. These seeds don't reproduce or are protected by patents, so that the farmer must buy them anew every season. Do you understand the scale of the scam? Humanity was deprived of the right to food. Now, to grow bread, you must pay a chemical giant. Farmers turned from independent owners into serfs of agribusiness holdings, mired in loans for equipment and fertilizers. And we got food that looks real, but is empty inside, devoid of minerals and vitamins. This led to an epidemic of chronic diseases, which in turn benefits the pharmacists. One hand washes the other. But the scariest stage of the reset is the commodification of man himself. At the moment of your birth, a document is created for you. Birth certificate. For you, it's just a souvenir paper. For the system, it's the creation of a new accounting unit, a new taxpayer, new collateral for state debt. In some legal theories that are carefully hushed up, it is said that this document is actually a security traded on exchanges. The state pledges your future labor for its loans. You haven't taken your first step yet, and your life is already valued, packaged into a derivative, and sold.
We live in a world where the legal fiction, legal person, has replaced the living human. Do you think you go to court or the bank as a human? No. You come as a representative of your persona created by the state. And this persona is completely powerless before its creator. Technology became the final nail in the coffin of our freedom. We were promised that machines would free us from labor, that we would work 4 hours a day and engage in creativity. What do we see in reality? We work more than peasants in the Middle Ages. Gadgets that were supposed to grant freedom have become digital collars. You're connected 24/7. Your boss, your bank, the tax authority, they're all in your pocket. Social media algorithms, developed by the best behaviorists, know more about you than you do yourself. They control your desires, your anger, your choices. This is no longer just control. It's programming reality. We have reached the point of no return. The system no longer needs millions of independent producers. It needs service staff for robots and algorithms. The middle class, which was the pillar of democracy, or its illusion, is being systematically destroyed. The rich become super rich, the poor become destitute, and the layer between them disappears. This is not a crisis. This is a managed demolition of the old structure. We're being prepared for a new normal, where you'll own nothing and be happy, as the slogan of one well-known international organization goes. But they forgot to add, you'll be happy because you won't have a choice. Rent instead of ownership.
Subscription instead of purchase. Car sharing instead of a personal car. Co-living instead of an apartment. All this is presented as convenience and eco-friendliness. In reality, it's a return to feudalism, only at a new digital level. You pay rent for every minute of your existence. Right now, we see the system testing tools of total control. Digital passports, social credit scores, carbon footprints. This is not science fiction. It's already working in test regions. If before you could be punished with a fine, in the future you'll simply be cut off from basic services. Didn't pay your taxes? Didn't pass the procedure? Your digital wallet is blocked. Your transit pass is cancelled. You fall out of society in 1 second. This is that very cage without bars that they've been building right under our noses for the last 100 years. And we ourselves, with our own hands, helped build it, trading freedom for convenience. We live in a facade that we take for the only possible reality. Look around. All these glass offices, endless shopping rows, administrative buildings. It's not just architecture. These are temples of the new religion, where bureaucracy is God and the interest rate is the profit. We have come to the finale of our investigation, and now, with all the cards on the table, the picture becomes terrifyingly clear. The system that has been built over the last 150 years is not designed for human development. It is designed as the perfect farm. And on this farm, we are not the farmers. We are the livestock. This sounds harsh, cynical, but let's set aside emotions and look at the bottom line. What do you truly own? Your body? It belongs to medicine and draft boards. Your thoughts? They are shaped by social media algorithms and school programs. Your money? It's digits on a bank server that can disconnect you in a second. Your home? It's a taxable object that you rent from the state. The most ingenious trick of this structure is that it relies on our voluntary consent. This is not a prison with bars where guards hold you by force. This is a mental cage. We ourselves get up every morning, put on our uniform, and go service the mechanisms that suck the life out of us. Why? Because they've instilled fear in us. Fear of being without rations,
fear of being excluded from the pack, fear of the unknown, of freedom. The system has raised a generation that panics at responsibility. It's easier for us to pay taxes and sleep peacefully than to figure out where that money goes. It's easier to take a loan and buy a ready-made solution than to create something of our own. We traded the right to be creators for the right to be consumers. And this deal was sealed not with blood, but with the silent consent of millions. Have you ever wondered why the system reacts so aggressively to any attempt at autonomy? Why is collecting rainwater prohibited in some states? Why can't you sell milk from your cow to your neighbor without a ton of certificates? Why is living in the forest without registration suspicious? Because an independent person is a glitch in the matrix. He doesn't bring profit to banks. He doesn't buy garbage. He doesn't watch ads. And he can't be scared with firing. One such person is an eccentric. 1 million such people is the collapse of the system. The debt economy exists only as long as there are those who borrow. The pyramid of power stands only because we hold it on our shoulders. If we step aside, it will collapse under its own weight. But the problem is that we've forgotten how to stand on our own feet. Over the last 100 years, we've been genetically modified through culture and laws. We've lost the skills of survival and self-organization. If tomorrow the electricity and internet are cut off, civilization in megacities will end in 3 days. We've become absolutely helpless appendages to infrastructure. And precisely this helplessness is the guarantee that we won't go anywhere. We will accept any conditions, any digital collars, any medical experiments, just to keep our comfort, our hot water, and food delivery. The system knows this. It knows there will be no revolt, because a rebel must be strong. And they've made us weak. The reset that conspiracy theorists talk so much about has already happened. We are no longer citizens of nation-states. We are users of a global platform. Our passports are just logins for accessing the system. Our rights are a user agreement that the administrator can change at any moment without notice. Have you noticed how the concept of human rights is being substituted with the concept of privilege? A privilege must be earned, with good behavior, the right medical status, loyalty, absence of debts. Social credit is not China's future. It's the present of the whole world, just overt in some places and hidden in bank and insurance scoring scores in others. So what is the philosophical punch I promised to deliver? It is simple and terrifying at the same time. There is no way out, outward. There is nowhere to run. The entire planet is divided into cadastral plots. All forests are accounted for. All rivers are under surveillance. You can't sail to an uninhabited island because satellites see everything. The only way out is inward. The system owns your physical body and your legal persona, but it cannot own your consciousness until you give it away yourself. Liberation begins with realizing that everything around is a game with made-up rules. Money is paper. Debt is fiction. Status is illusion. Laws that contradict common sense and natural rights are just text printed by a printer. They fear only one thing: that we will wake up. That we will stop believing in the value of their cut paper. That we will start negotiating directly with each other, bypassing intermediaries. That we will remember that land, water, and air belong to us by right of birth, not by right of rent. They are building digital fences because they know. Their power is a colossus on clay feet. This entire edifice holds on our trust and our fear. Remove the fear, and the policeman becomes just a man in a uniform. Remove the trust, and the banker becomes just a con artist with a calculator. We live in a unique time when the masks have been dropped. Before, slavery was crude, chains and whips. Now it is elegant, mortgage and career. But the essence hasn't changed. Someone else's will controls your fate. And now, when you know exactly how this invisible prison was built, from the substitution of gold with paper to the substitution of education with instruction, you face a choice. You cannot change the system alone, snapping your fingers, but you can stop being its ideal battery. You can start creating your own islands of autonomy. Study laws to use them as a shield, not as a sword. Master skills that cannot be taken away. Build connections with living people, not avatars.